You felt oppressed by the idea that psychotherapy turns you into something meek, open, radiating availability to every passerby. That is a convenient logic. Carl Jung spent decades documenting what really happens when an empath meets their shadow. The reality is far harsher than the myths suggest. A fully integrated empath does not become more accessible. They become operationally dangerous to anyone who mistakenly mistakes their softness for weakness. Not because of aggression, but because of their invulnerability. And this invulnerability destroys entire systems of social control that depend on your unconscious complicity. Let me show you what Jung actually observed during the clinical transition from vulnerable sensitivity to integrated psychological sovereignty. Before integration, the empath exists in what Jung would call a state of constant psychic vulnerability. Your nervous system works without filters. You pick up emotional interference that others don't touch, the anxiety in a room that no one speaks aloud, the hostility beneath a polite conversation, the depression someone hides but never names. This isn't mysticism, it's heightened perception honed by the necessity to survive. You learn to read micro-expressions, vocal fluctuations, behavioral oddities because your early environment demanded it. Perhaps you had a parent whose mood determined whether the day would be safe or unbearable. Perhaps you navigated a family system where spoken words contradicted the energetic truth. You developed a warning sense, like soldiers develop threat detection, through repeated exposure to an environment where missed signals had consequences. But here is the price. As your sensing sharpened, your boundaries dissolved. You began experiencing what Jung called unconscious fusion, the inability to distinguish your own emotional content from that of those around you. You entered a room and absorbed the collective unconscious of everyone present, their irritation, sadness, unprocessed trauma, and it all invaded your system as if it were yours. You didn't choose this. Your psyche is wired like a receiver, and without proper individuation, that receiver became a compulsory absorber. You absorbed other people's emotional waste because you had no behavioral model to understand. Their darkness is not yours. The unintegrated empath builds their identity around this servicing. You believed your purpose was to process others' pain. You became the family therapist at 12, the friend who always understood at 16, the partner capable of holding space for anyone at 25. And with each role, you buried yourself deeper under layers of service. You had no boundaries because boundaries felt like rejection. You couldn't say no because no felt like cruelty. You agreed when your body screamed no. You stayed when every instinct told you to leave. You smiled through your own destruction because you believed your value equaled your ability to endure what others could not. Jung saw this scenario again and again. Empaths came to him not with ordinary pathology. They were exhausting themselves on psychic material that did not belong to their own consciousness. They lived as repositories of the collective. Each one suppressed aggression. Each one suppressed lust. Each one suppressed anger. Imagine what that does to your sense of self. Years of absorbing others' emotional fuel, you lose touch with your own inner reality. You can read anyone except yourself. You know what others feel but cannot name your own state. You become a sophisticated psychological instrument aimed outward, with no capacity for internal calibration. This is the state before integration. Maximum sensitivity, zero protection, complete disappearance of self beneath the mask of compassion. Jung understood. Most people don't choose individuation. They are thrown into it by crisis. For the empath, this crisis usually comes as betrayal, not ordinary disappointment. Betrayal that breaks your fundamental operating system. Most often, the person you protected the most, the one whose pain you enveloped in care, the one you believed would never turn your openness into harm. And then you learn the truth. They lied for years. They used your empathy as a resource to exploit. They never saw you as a person, only a function to be deployed. This moment is decisive, not because it destroys you, but because it presents a choice you can no longer postpone. Continue to care. Continue to explain the obvious. Continue to override your intuition to preserve the relationship. Or trust what you always knew but refused to acknowledge. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow. But for the empath, it is more concrete. The moment you confront your own suppressed anger, your own rage, your own capacity for destruction. All the traits you labeled as rude, evil, or wrong, these aspects wait for you in the shadow. Integration requires you to claim them. This is not a nice process. You don't integrate the shadow through affirmations or therapeutic techniques. You integrate it through acknowledgement, You have been betraying your own destructiveness. Every time you suppressed your instincts to preserve another's comfort, you committed an act of self-abnegation. The turning point is when you stop committing this violence against yourself. When you look at the person who deceived you and feel nothing, no desire to fix them, no need to understand, no impulse to gift them pity, forgiveness, or restoring justice, only clarity. Cold, precise, relentless clarity. What happens after the breaking point is not like healing as the self-help industry describes it. You don't return to openness. You don't become more trusting. You don't soften. You harden. Integration means taking every quality you suppressed and bringing it under conscious management. Your intelligence, your capacity for sober recognition, your willingness to let others carry their own burdens, your ability to leave without explanation, your skill at recognizing manipulation before it takes shape. These are not dark qualities. These are operational necessities that you were taught to see as flaws. And the moment you stop seeing them as flaws, everything changes. Jung documented 3 distinct stages of this transformation. Each builds on the previous. Each requires releasing another comforting illusion about who you should be. Stage 1. Cessation of servicing. The first stage is simple. You stop being a container for others' emotional waste. It sounds obvious, but the mechanism is precise. You develop what Jung called conscious discrimination, the ability to observe another's emotional content without internalizing it. Someone projects envy onto you. Before, you would service this, ask if you provoked it, try to fix what you thought you broke. Now you notice it. You recognize the projection mechanism in real time, and you don't accept it. This creates an effect that looks like coldness but operates as a mirror. The other person's emotional load returns to sender. They are forced to hold what they tried to hand you, and most people cannot tolerate this. They escalate. They accuse you of coldness, detachment. You're not the person you used to be. They are right. You are not. That person was unconscious. This stage instantly destroys manipulation through guilt. When someone tries to make you responsible for their emotional state, and you simply note the attempt without accepting responsibility, the entire manipulation collapses. They have no lever. You watch them struggle with it, without moving. This is not malice. It is the natural consequence of consciousness encountering unconsciousness. When you stop participating in another's projection, they are forced to meet what they are projecting. Stage 2. Aggressive selectivity. The second stage enrages those who believe that empaths must be available to everyone. You become selective, aggressively selective. You use your heightened perception to decide who deserves access to your inner world. This is not about building walls. Walls defend. Selectivity is strategic. You are still capable of deep presence, of holding space for genuine pain, of long-term intimate relationships. But now these abilities are forbidden to those who do not demonstrate mutual awareness, to those who do not do their own psychological work, who do not respect boundaries without testing them, who cannot exist without your responsibility. For everyone else, you become unavailable. Not hostile, not reactive, simply unavailable. The empath who was an open door becomes a roof with terms of entry. And these terms are non-negotiable. You don't explain them, defend them, or soften them for others' comfort. You simply act on them. Here, the difference between being nice and being good becomes operationally significant. Nice avoids conflict. Good makes choices even when choice creates discomfort. The integrated empath stops being nice. They become so good that most experience it as rudeness. Good enough to let someone face consequences. Good enough to refuse support. Good enough to say no without apology or explanation. Good enough to end relationships held together only by your self-sacrifice. This selectivity is based not on judgment, but on pattern recognition. You have observed how certain personality structures work. You know trajectories. You can predict outcomes because you have seen the same patterns across dozens of relationships. You don't need months to determine whether someone acts with integrity. You know it within the first 3 interactions. Not through intuition in a mystical sense, but through data. Through the massive unconscious database you have been building since childhood. Stage 3, predictive danger. The third stage is what would truly horrify you if you understood its implications. Because now you become what Jung called psychologically develops to a degree few achieve. You are not just empathic, you are predictive. Think about what you have actually been doing all these years. Every time you processed another's emotional state, you collected data. Every time you read a room, you cataloged patterns. Every time you felt another's intention before it was expressed, you built a predictive model of human behavior. The unintegrated empath accumulated all this data but felt guilty using it. You suppressed your insights. You called yourself judgmental when your instincts signaled danger. You turned internal protection into betrayal because it felt kinder. But the integrated empath fully trusts their database. When every part of your system signals danger, you don't need external justification. You don't need proof. You already have it. And you act accordingly. This is what makes the restored empath operationally dangerous. You see the game before it begins. Someone sits next to you and you know within seconds. You know they are lying about where they have been. You know they are about to make a request designed specifically for you. You know they are setting up a manipulative combination several moves ahead. You know because you have seen this same sequence before. Microexpressions do not lie. Vocal patterns do not lie. Behavioral rhythms do not lie. This is heightened perception operating at full capacity. You are processing psychological and emotional information at a level most never achieve. You have a framework built from years of survival that now functions as a sophisticated detection system. And here is the critical element that separates the integrated empath from the manipulator. You could use this knowledge destructively. You understand the mechanics of manipulation better than most narcissists. You know exactly which buttons to press, which fears to activate, which wounds to stir. You have the complete schematic. But you choose not to use it. Jung spent a great deal of time analyzing why some personalities integrate their power responsibly while others weaponize it. He found that the difference lies in conscious ethical choice. The integrated empath makes a daily decision to use their abilities for protection, not for domination. You see vulnerabilities. You understand that your knowledge of human psychology gives you unfair advantages in almost any interaction. But you refuse to realize them, not because you are incapable, but because you have developed something more sophisticated than tactical superiority. You have developed integrity. This is what Jung meant by individuation. You have integrated both light and shadow. You have the capacity for both deep compassion and ruthless precision. You can be soft or firm depending on the situation. You are no longer locked into a single mode of existence. When you complete this integration, something happens that goes beyond your personal psychology. You create a ripple effect that forces everyone in your environment either to evolve or to expose themselves. Family systems built on dysfunction do not survive with transformation, not because you attack them, but because you have ceased to be the supporting structure that held the dysfunction in place. When the person who always absorbed the tension, always smoothed over conflict, always sacrificed themselves for a false peace is removed, the entire system is forced to reorganize. And this reorganization reveals what was always true but never spoken directly. Your dependent parent can no longer drink without consequences because you no longer clean up after them. Your borderline partner can no longer dump their unbearable psyche onto you because you have stopped being their external regulator. The controlling family member can no longer manage you through guilt. You have stopped feeling responsible for their emotional stability. The empath who provided all this servicing has disappeared, and in their place stands someone who values their inner peace more than the accommodation of conflicts. Some relationships deepen. Those who respect your transformation feel inspired rather than threatened. They begin to do their own work. These connections become more authentic than before. But others break, and they break loudly. Those who benefited from your unconsciousness will scream. They will summon allies. They will create narratives where you are the problem. Because if you are the problem, they don't have to change. And here's where your true strength shows. You do not defend. You do not explain. You do not try to convince anyone of your rightness. You observe. You watch people reveal their true nature in their reactions to you. And you make decisions based on these observations. No hope for potential. No expectation that people will change. No holding on to relationships that drain rather than nourish. What you become after full integration, Jung called the individual self. A person who descended into their darkness, integrated what they found there, and returned with abilities most will never develop. You are no longer afraid of deep loss, because you have already lost the version of yourself that needed to be a saint. You can let go of anyone who does not support your truth. And this freedom makes you a magnet for conscious people and a repulsion for the unconscious. Your sensitivity is not weakness. It never was weakness. It was a sophisticated perception system waiting to be connected to boundaries, anger, and self-mastery. You have not become less sensitive. You have become consciously sensitive. And this awareness transforms sensitivity from vulnerability into tactical advantage. You can feel everything and still maintain sovereignty. You can see the worst in people and still choose to interact on your terms. You can be strong and peaceful at the same time. This is the truth that Jung documented but that most misunderstand. Healing does not mean returning to who you were before the pain. You cannot go back. That version was unconscious. The integrated version is far more capable. You are aware, you are whole, you own every part of yourself, both compassion and the capacity for immediate pushback, both kindness and firmness, both openness and absolute boundaries. You are not too much for this world. You are exactly what conscious evolution needs. One who can hold space for darkness without becoming it. One who can love deeply without losing themselves. One who can see through destruction while maintaining their own integrity. The unintegrated empath asks, why is this happening to me? The integrated empath knows what happened to you can no longer be used against you. You cannot be blamed, guilted, or pulled back into old patterns. You were never supposed to save everyone. You were supposed to save yourself, and thereby serve as proof that integration is possible. This is the transformation Jung observed. Not a return to innocence, but a transition to self-possession. You are aware, whole, and operationally inconvenient for anyone who mistakes your attentiveness for availability. You do not argue, do not defend, do not prove anything to anyone. You simply see patterns, draw your conclusions, and act accordingly. And most often, when you leave so quietly, they barely notice you are gone. No drama, no explanations, just absence. This is what the integrated empath becomes. Not better, not more convenient, not more open. They become sovereign, self-possessed, unshakable in their knowing, impenetrable in their boundaries, immune to unconscious manipulations. They become a possessor of operational understanding, a respecter of strategic selectivity, empathic, with absolute self-preservation. And this combination is one of the rarest forces in psychology. You now understand what took years. Your protection is not selfishness. It is the only reasonable response to a world that will consume you if you allow it. Withdrawing from toxicity is not weakness. It is the ultimate expression of self-respect. Choosing yourself is not cruelty. It is the foundation of any healthy relationship you will ever build. When you choose this, when you decide that your psychological integrity matters more than another's comfort, the frequency changes. The people who exploited you begin to avoid you. The situations that destroyed you stop arising. The drama that always followed you can no longer find you. Not because you are hiding, but because you are operating at a level where unconscious behavior simply does not reach you. Where manipulation breaks like water against stone. Where toxicity swirls in a powerless attempt to latch on, but you no longer stand in the strike zone. Your true legacy is not the ability to feel everything, but the ability to choose what is worth feeling, not the ability to help everyone, but the wisdom to invest only in those who do their own work, not infinite patience, but the strength to leave when patience ceases to be a virtue. Your breaking point is your initiation. Your empathy is your advantage. And now that you realize this, you are invulnerable to anyone who acts from unconsciousness. This is what Jung called individuation. This is what a healed empath truly becomes.